Before I tell you this story, I need you to do one thing. Think about your bank account right now. Think about the money you've saved over decades. Your retirement fund. Your security. Your golden years. Now imagine it's all gone. In 6 months. Because someone you loved, someone you trusted more than anyone else in the world, promised you they could make it grow. This happened to George and Karen Anderson, and it happens to thousands of American retirees every single year. Listen to this story, because it could save you from repeating their devastating mistake. Rain drummed against the windows of the modest ranch house in Tampa, Florida, as 68-year-old George Anderson sat at the kitchen table, staring at his laptop screen. His hands that had sorted mail for 42 years at the Tampa, Maine post office, trembled slightly. The numbers on the screen made no sense whatsoever. The account that had contained $2,427,000 just 2 months ago now showed only $12,847. This can't be right, he whispered to himself, his voice cracking. This simply can't be right. Karen came in from the backyard, where she'd been tending her tomato plants in the humid Florida heat. Her hands were damp from the garden hose, and her smile vanished instantly when she saw her husband's face. "George, what's wrong?" He couldn't speak. He just turned the laptop screen toward her. Karen read the numbers once, then twice. Then she slowly sank into the chair beside him, her legs giving out. But where did the money go? Her voice was barely a whisper. Parrish knew the answer. He'd known it for days, but hadn't dared say it aloud. Now he had to. "Marcus," he said, the name heavy as a stone. It was Marcus. "Understand how this happened. We need to go back 6 months. To the day George Anderson turned 68, and his oldest son came to visit with an expensive bottle of wine and a promise that would change everything. It was a Saturday in April 2022. Spring had finally broken, the last of Florida's mild winter, and Karen had prepared a large lunch. The children were invited, all 3 of them. But as usual, only 2 showed up. Marcus, the oldest at 42, arrived first. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, despite it being a casual family gathering, and carried himself with the confidence that only people with money, or those who claim to have money, possess. He kissed his mother on the cheek, gave his father a firm handshake, and sat down with an easy smile. Michael, the youngest at 35, arrived 20 minutes later. He taught middle school math in Brandon, always slightly late, always a bit scattered, but with a genuinely warm heart. He carried a homemade cake and a gift wrapped in recycled paper. Sophie didn't come. She lived in Seattle now, and though she'd sent a text saying work prevented her from flying down, everyone knew the real truth. She was staying away intentionally. She'd been doing it for years, ever since she'd moved across the country right after college. The family had never quite understood why. Here's something critical that George and Karen didn't realize at the time. When one family member consistently avoids family gatherings, it's often a warning sign. They may know something the rest of the family doesn't. "Wow. So Dad," Marcus said, pouring wine for everyone. 68 years old? Retired for 2 years now. How does it feel?" George smiled genuinely. "It's good. We have peace. We have each other. We don't need anything more." "But you could have more," Marcus said, and his eyes took on an intensity that George couldn't quite read. "Much more." Karen, who had learned to read her children's tones after decades of motherhood, looked up sharply. "What do you mean, Marcus?" Marcus leaned back in his chair with practiced ease. "I just mean that you've worked your whole lives. You have almost $2.50 million in savings, but it's just sitting there in a savings account. It's not growing. With inflation, you're actually losing value every year." "We have a retirement fund," George said carefully. "It gives us 4% annually. That's safe." 4%? Marcus laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, just superior. "Dad, I know people getting 20, 30, sometimes 40% returns annually. And it's not even risky. It's just smarter investing. Michael, who had been quiet, spoke up. Marcus, that doesn't sound realistic. High returns mean high risk. That's basic economics. Marcus turned to his brother with barely concealed condescension. You're a middle school teacher, Mike. What do you really know about the financial world? I know enough to be skeptical, Michael replied calmly. Karen touched George's arm under the table. It was her way of saying, let's change the subject. But Marcus wasn't finished. Look, I don't want to pressure you, Marcus said, standing up and walking to the window. But I'm working in investments now. Cryptocurrency, green technology startups, emerging markets. It's the future. And I want to help you. I can help you. Because you're my parents, and you deserve better than 4%. George felt something warm bloom in his chest. His son wanted to help him. His son was successful. His son loved him. What would we need to do? George heard himself ask. Karen squeezed his arm harder. No. Not now. But Marcus was already smiling. Just think about it, Dad. I'll send you some materials. Read them. And if you're interested, we can talk about it. No pressure at all. That evening, after Marcus had driven away in his BMW, and Michael had taken the bus back to Brandon, George, and Karen, sat alone at the kitchen table. I don't like it, Karen said quietly. Don't like what? The way Marcus was talking. It sounded like a sales pitch. He's just trying to help, George said, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. The documents arrived 2 days later. A large manila envelope in the mailbox, addressed to George and Karen Anderson.org. Inside was a slick, professional brochure with the heading, Coastal Investment Partners, Tomorrow's Wealth, Today. The pages were filled with graphs, charts, and photos of smiling people standing in front of yachts, beach houses, and exotic destinations. There were testimonials from satisfied clients. In just 2 years, we doubled our retirement savings. Thank you, Coastal. Richard and Linda M., ages 64 and 62. Finally, we can travel like we always dreamed, without worry. Peter R., age 69. At the back of the brochure was a handwritten note. Dad and Mom, I've become a partner at Coastal Investment Partners. It would make me so proud to help you. You deserve the best. Love, Marcus. George read the documents 3 times. Karen read them once and set them aside. It sounds too good to be true, she said. But it's Marcus, George said. Our son. Yes, Karen said quietly. That's what worries me. There's a critical red flag that George should have recognized. Legitimate investment firms don't send glossy brochures with vague promises of doubling money. They provide detailed prospectuses, regulatory disclosures, and realistic projections. If an investment opportunity looks like a magazine advertisement, it's probably a scam. Why not call? But George had already decided. He wanted to at least hear more. He called Marcus the next day. Dad! Marcus's voice was full of enthusiasm. Did you read the material? Yes. It sounds interesting, but I don't understand all the technical language. You don't need to, Marcus said smoothly. That's why you have me. Should we meet? I can come by Sunday. Sunday came, and with it came Marcus, this time with a tablet, more documents, and a pen. They sat in the living room. Karen had made coffee and set out a plate of cookies, but she said very little. She just sat and listened as Marcus opened his tablet and began his presentation. Look here, he said, showing a graph with dramatically rising curves. This is how Coastal Investment Partners has performed over the last 3 years. Average return, 28% annually. That sounds incredible, George said. It is incredible, but it's also real. We invest in emerging technologies, solar energy, wind farms, cryptocurrency, AI companies, things that are growing exponentially, not old, boring bank accounts. But is it safe? George asked. Nothing is 100% safe, Dad, but this is as close as you can get. And you can always withdraw your money if you want. It's not locked in. Karen stood up suddenly. I need some fresh air. She walked out to the screened porch without looking back. George watched her go, worried. Your mother is skeptical. I understand, Marcus said. She has every right to be. But Dad, let me ask you something. Do you trust me? George looked into his son's eyes. They were the same eyes he'd seen since the boy was born. The same eyes that had looked up at him when he'd taught him to ride a bike, when he'd graduated high school, when he'd given his first job presentation. Of course I trust you, George said. Then let me help you, Marcus said, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. Let me make your retirement everything you've always dreamed of. Let me give you the freedom to live, not just survive. George felt tears pressing behind his eyes. The love for his son, the pride, the hope, it filled everything. He nodded. Why? What do I need to do? Marcus smiled and pulled out a document. Just sign here. It's an investment agreement. I'll transfer the money into a secure fund, and you can track it online every day. You have complete control. How much should we invest? Marcus thought for a moment. What about $1 million? That way you still have almost $1.5 million in your account as security. $1 million. It sounded manageable. Not everything, just a portion. Okay, George said. Let's do it. He signed. Marcus packed up the papers, hugged his father tightly, and drove away. When Karen came back inside, the deal was already done. What did you do? She asked quietly. I invested $1 million. We're keeping the rest. It's safe. Karen said nothing. She just went upstairs to the bedroom and closed the door. Her first month went perfectly. George logged into the investment platform Marcus had given him access to and watched the numbers climb. After 4 weeks, $1 million had become $1,124,000. Look, he told Karen one morning over breakfast. We've made $124,000 in 1 month. Karen looked at the screen. That seems strange. How can it grow that fast? Because they're good investments, George said. He felt smart. He felt young. He felt like he'd made a decision that was finally paying off. Here's what George didn't know. Scammers often show fake early gains to build trust and encourage victims to invest more. This tactic is called priming the pump. You see quick profits, get excited, and then put in everything you have. By the time you realize the gains were never real, your money is gone. The second month continued. Now the million had become $1,287,000. George called Marcus to thank him. It's going great, Marcus. You were right. Of course I was right, Dad. And it can get even better. What if you invested the rest too? Then you could double your gains. The rest? George hesitated. That's almost $1.5 million more. Yes, think about it. In 1 year, you could have 5, maybe 6 million. You could travel the world, buy a vacation home, help Michael, help me, make sure you never worry about money again. I should talk to Karen about it. Of course. But Dad, be quick. The market is hot right now. In a week, the opportunity might be gone. George hung up. He felt a tingling excitement, but also a small nagging doubt. That evening, he brought it up with Karen. Marcus says we should invest the rest. No, Karen said without hesitation. But Karen, look at the numbers. We've already made. I don't trust it, George. I don't trust Marcus. Those words hit George like a physical blow. How can you say something like that? He's our son. Exactly, Karen said, and her eyes were full of pain. And I know him better than you do. What do you mean? Karen sighed deeply. George, do you remember when Marcus was 25 and he started that online business, and he asked us to loan him $100,000? And we did? Yes, and he paid us back after 2 years. And only because I threatened to take him to court. George, Marcus, has always been, he loves us. I know that, but he loves money more. George shook his head stubbornly. You're wrong. People change. He's an adult now. I hope so, Karen said. But I will not risk all our money on that hope. That night, George slept poorly. He loved his wife, but he also trusted his son. And he wanted, more than anything, to prove that he'd made the right decision. Next morning, while Karen was at physical therapy, George went to the computer. He logged into the bank, and he transferred the remaining $1,347,000 to Coastal Investment Partners. When Karen came home, he didn't tell her. The third month started well. George logged in every day and watched the numbers grow. $3,100,000, $3,240,000, $3,389,000. It was magical. But then, midway through the third month, the growth stopped. The numbers began to fall. Slowly at first. $3,389,000 became $3,311,000. Then $3,189,000. George sent Marcus a message. Why are my investments dropping? Marcus replied the same day. It's normal, Dad. The market fluctuates. It'll come back. Be patient. George tried to be patient, but every day the numbers dropped more. $3 million. $2,800,000. $2,500,000. He called Marcus, panic rising in his throat. What's happening? I'm losing money. Dad, calm down. It's a market correction. We just need to hold steady. If we pull out now, we lose everything. But if we wait, it'll come back stronger. But it's all our money, Marcus. I know. And I'm fighting for you. I'm putting my own money in to support the fund. We're in this together. George felt somewhat reassured. His son was fighting for him. That meant something. But the numbers kept falling. Fourth month, $2,100,000. Fifth month, $1,600,000. Sixth month, $927,000. George could no longer hide it from Karen. He had to tell her what he'd done. We are sons. When he did, she said nothing. She just stood up, took her jacket, and walked out the door. When she returned 3 hours later, she'd spoken to their attorney. We need to report him to the police, she said. But he's our son, George said. And now he was crying. We can't. Yes, George. We can, and we must. But when they went to the police, they discovered the truth. Coastal Investment Partners existed. It was a registered business in Delaware. The contract George had signed was legally binding, and it stated clearly, all investments involve risk. There is no guarantee of return. The police couldn't help. It wasn't fraud in the legal sense. It was a bad investment. But my son promised me. Mr. Anderson, the detective said gently, what was promised verbally, we can't prove. What matters legally is what's on paper. George and Karen went home with empty hands and shattered hearts. They tried to contact Marcus. His phone was disconnected. His apartment in Miami was empty. Coastal Investment Partners' website had been taken down. Marcus was gone. Well, 2 weeks later, George sat at the same kitchen table, staring at the same bank statement. $12,847 remaining. That was all. Wait. Karen came in, and this time, she simply sat down and took his hand. We have Michael, she said quietly. We have each other. We have the house. We have our health. But we have no future, George said. Yes, Karen said. We do. It's just different than we thought. That week, Michael temporarily moved back home. He helped find a smaller apartment for his parents, helped sell the house, and helped them apply for supplemental assistance from Social Security. You don't need to worry, Michael said. I'll help you. We didn't want to be a burden, George said. You're not a burden. You're my parents. You were always there for me. Now, I'm here for you. They moved to a smaller, cheaper apartment in Brandon to be closer to Michael. George took a part-time job as a receptionist at a local hotel. Karen started baking cakes that she sold at the local farmer's market. It wasn't the retirement they dreamed of, but it was a life, an honest life. After the catastrophe, the phone rang late one evening. It was Sophie. Ain't it something? I see you or not. Hi, Mom, she said, and her voice was weak. Sophie? Karen sat up in bed. Are you okay? Yes. I heard what happened. With Marcus, I'm so sorry. How did you know? Michael wrote to me. Mom, Dad, I would have warned you if you'd asked. What do you mean? George had taken the phone now. Sophie sighed. Dad, the reason I stayed away, it was because of Marcus. He did something similar to me when I was 23. He borrowed money from me that he never paid back. He stole my credit card information. I had to move to... Karen and George sat in shock. Why didn't you tell us more clearly? Karen asked. Because you wouldn't have believed me, Sophie said. You believed in him. Always. The silence was deafening. Do you forgive us? Karen finally asked. Of course, Sophie said. You're my parents. And now you know the truth. May see. A story of George and Karen spread quietly through Tampa, Brandon, and the surrounding communities. It didn't become a major scandal, but it became a warning. And surely hence, at a community meeting organized by the county for elderly residents, George stood before 30 other retirees and told his story. He stood at a podium and said, I thought I was being smart. I thought I was helping my family, but I learned 3 things. First, if something sounds too good to be true, it is. Second, trust is not the same as blindness, even when it's your own son. Third, the room applauded, not because it was a happy story, but because it was a true story, and the truth teaches us how to survive. War. Marcus never reappeared. Coastal Investment Partners was investigated by the CC, but since the company was based in an offshore tax, haven in the Cayman Islands, they couldn't do much. Other families had lost money too. Some lost less. Others lost more. Ways. But George and Karen lost something worse. They lost their son. Today, almost 2 years after the catastrophe, George and Karen still live in the small apartment in Brandon. Michael visits every Sunday. Sophie visits every 3 months. They don't have much, but they have enough. And on the kitchen wall, there now hangs a small note that Karen wrote by hand. Well, the greatest wealth is not gold or money. It's knowing who you can trust and who you cannot. And I'll be okay. This story is not just about money. It's about trust, about love, and about the choices we make as we age. Betrayal. If you're a retiree, or if you know one, remember these critical lessons. First, if something sounds too good to be true, it is. Legitimate investments never promise 20 to 40% annual returns without risk. That's either a lie or a scam. Always talk to your spouse or someone else you trust before making major financial decisions. George would have avoided catastrophe if he'd listened to Karen. Grandparent, a critical, even when it involves family. Love for your children should not make you blind. Trust, but verify. And seek professional advice. Go to your bank. Go to an independent financial advisor. Never make major decisions based on one person's promises. Fifth, what matters most in life cannot be stolen. George lost his money, but he kept Karen. He kept Michael. He kept his dignity. Money comes and goes, but the people who love you for who you are, not for what you have, they stay. And that is the greatest wealth of all. Here are the specific warning signs George missed. 1. Pressure to act quickly. The opportunity might be gone in a week. 2. Vague technical languaging. No specific details about how profits are generated. 3. Unrealistic returns. 20-40% annually is a red flag. 4. And family member. Avoiding specifics. Marcus wouldn't explain the actual investments. 5. 1. Family member avoiding gatherings. Sophie stayed away for a reason. 6. Glossy marketing materials. Legitimate investments provide detailed disclosures, not advertisements. 7. Offshore company location. Hard to regulate or recover funds. 8. Yearly fake profitsing, designed to encourage more investment. What George should have done, when George should have done. 1. Consulted an independent financial advisor before signing anything. 2. Researched coastal investment partners with the SEC and BBB. 3. Asked for detailed documentation. Where exactly is the money invested? 4. Don't talk to Sophie. She knew Marcus's history. 5. Listen to Karen. She sensed something wrong. 6. Started with a small amount. Test with $10,000, not $1 million. 7. And required regular third-party audits, not just Marcus's word. 8. I never invested money he couldn't afford to lose. Inspired by true events across the United States, where thousands of elderly people every year become victims of investment fraud committed by people they trust, including family members. If you or someone you know experiences similar situations, contact the SEC your state attorney general's office, or the National Elder Fraud Hotline at 1-833-FRAUD-11. Thank you for listening.